most of the regrets in my life are when I wish I should have just remained silent. The more that we can react less and respond more, the better our life is going to be. It's just important to understand that our words really are powerful. And once they escape your mouth, man, there's no taking them back. Saying more is not always better, right? Like most of the time, we should only speak if we have something to say. And the more that we try to overtalk when we don't have the right thing to say, the more often we're going to get in trouble. I want to talk about the 4 situations when we should just remain silent. Hello and welcome to another episode of Real Men, Real Conversations. And today on the podcast, I want to talk about the 4 situations when we should just remain silent. And this is a topic that has really been hitting home for me. This is the thing that I've been working hardest on the last 6 to 12 months, is learning that saying more is not always better, right? Like most of the time, we should only speak if we have something to say. And the more that we try to overtalk when we don't have the right thing to say, the more often we're going to get in trouble. So we've all heard the saying, sometimes the best thing you can say is nothing at all. Right. And the reality is our words are powerful. And I've I remember a couple of years ago, I had a couple of friends pull me aside. We were all hanging out one night and they said, dude, because we ask each other these questions. Me and my friends group will be like, all right, where's a blind spot that I have? Or what's something I need to work on? Or what's some good, raw, honest feedback you can give me about my life right now? And it's a really powerful exercise, really helpful to know what maybe you're not seeing. And my friends told me when we were doing this, and they said, dude, you don't understand the power of your words sometimes. They're very powerful. And you'll say things that we know it's a throwaway. We know you don't mean anything by it, but it can crush people or it can really set them back and you don't even see it. You don't even realize it. And it really threw me off at the time because I didn't. And I remember shortly after that, I had an incident come up and I almost said something that I would have completely regretted later. And this still happens quite often. I've been doing a lot of embodiment work, which is essentially a lot of breath work, a lot of grounding, a lot of just feeling your presence, like your butt, feeling it in the seat, feeling your feet on the floor, working through a lot of things right now. It's the thing that I'm working the hardest on because the more that we can react less and respond more, the better our life is going to be. And so for me, it's just important to understand that our words really are powerful. And once they escape your mouth, man, there's no taking them back. There's a picture that I saw recently, right? And it was a picture of a dog jumping off a cliff to try to catch a bird. And the bird's just flying away. And it basically was something along the lines of like, our anger sometimes will be our downfall. And it's a really powerful image because you see the dog, because he's trying to, and the dog's like really angry and it's trying to grab this bird and the bird's going to fly off and the dog will be dead. So a couple things our words can do. They can either heal us or they can hurt us. You can say the right thing that can totally heal somebody, but you say the wrong thing, totally hurt them and damage them. They can inspire us, but they can also discourage us. They can clarify a situation, but they can also confuse somebody very much so. And so I would say, and I think most people would agree, but most of the regrets in my life are when I wish I should have just remained silent, right? I think every time I've reacted from that frontal lobe and, the flight or fight, and you say things that maybe you're going to regret. And so just being able to embody your own feelings and to feel them when stuff comes up and you get triggered or you get excited or you get over emotional about something, that ability to remain silent and calm in those situations is truly a master class that we all need to be learning every single day. So the 4 times when we should remain quiet, I want to go through this. And by the way, speaking our truth is very important, you guys. I've learned that, the biggest difference between being assertive, there's a big difference between being assertive and being aggressive. Like, every one of us should be assertive. We should be bold in what we're doing. But when you're aggressive with people, that's when we get in trouble, right? You want to stand up for yourself, but doing so, you don't want to cause unnecessary harm to other people or maybe yourself as well. And so I want to clarify too, like silence is not weakness, right? It's not passivity. And it's also definitely not repression. This is one thing that I want you to understand. Like choosing to be silent is much different than being repressed or not just being able to say the thing you want to even when you want to. But silence in the right situation, it really is one of the number one qualities of a person that has strength and has self-control. So the key again goes back to you want to be able to respond and not react. So how do we do that, right? And what is the key difference? Well, here's the number one thing that I've seen, like when I'm responding versus when I'm reacting, is the biggest difference is if I can think about the long-term outcome that I want before I speak, then I usually respond in the right way. Whereas if I'm thinking in the short term, I don't really give a shit, right? And here's the problem is like, how many of you guys have had one of these situations where you said something and you later regret it? Right. And I've had some little examples. For example, I remember I was playing in a softball game and I knew if I said this next comment, I was going to get kicked out. And I said it anyway. And why do we do that? Right. We do it because in the moment it feels good, because in the moment I didn't give a shit. Right. I have other examples, bigger examples where I've had, close friends or family members and I said something in a moment of anger and you can't take that stuff back. And sometimes you can repair the situation, but it's never quite the same. And so those are the big regrets that I have, right? So how much unnecessary drama in our life can we avoid if we learn not to speak too soon, right? How often can we avoid that drama? And frankly, just conflicts that could have been avoided if we could have just taken a step back or taken a deep breath. And we've all heard this so often, but we all still don't do it when we should so many times. So, all right, so the 4 situations. Number 1 is when you're angry or upset. Pretty obvious one, okay? And the truth is responding in anger almost never, I don't think ever, leads to a positive outcome, right? Because then here's what's going on. Your emotions cloud your judgment. You say things that you don't mean. And here's what I was saying a little bit earlier, is like short term, it kind of feels good to say that in the moment, but then long term, it just leads to regret. So we have to have that discipline. When we're angry or upset, that is the first time we can know to be silent. And I've had so many of these chances in my life and so many that I've blown and done the wrong way. And every time, though, that I get myself or I feel myself getting a little angry or a little upset and I take that time, and by the way, it can be really good to have somebody to call that isn't the person you want to say it to, or to have an exercise where maybe you write a letter out and, or type a text, but you don't actually type it to them. Maybe put it in your notes. Don't accidentally type it either. So don't put it in the text to them and then in case you accidentally hit send. But those can be helpful things, and you just delete it and move on. So what are some of the things you can do, again, while you're remaining silent when you're angry or when you're upset? Well, number 1 is take a few breaths, okay? I've been practicing some different breath work, different breaths recently. A couple of these people I've been working with, I'm going to get on the podcast. I can't wait to share their information with you. But one of the most important ones you can do, one of the biggest ones you can do is you take, it's called expansion breath, and you basically take a big breath in. So you're like, and then when you're at the peak, when you're full, you take 2 more little breaths to just expand and then you breathe it out through your mouth. And when you do that, it kind of you start to be very intentional about the breath you're taking, right? You just want to be very intentional about the breath. So like purposely breathe in and then pause before you get to the top, and then breathe out and pause before you get to the bottom. You're intentionally doing it. Taking a walk is one of the best things you can do. It starts to clear your head, starts to let your thoughts come through. Another healthy outlet can be a journaling. One of the things that I do when I journal, just because it's gotten me in trouble a few times in the past, is when I journal now, I write it and then I throw it away. I actually don't want the journal to be out there because it's your thoughts when you're angry, and I don't want somebody finding it or reading it later thinking I'm some kind of psycho. But it's really helpful too, because if you know nobody's ever going to read it, you can really let the emotion out. You can really let your anger come out and let your feelings come out on that paper, and just getting them out of your head or out of your body onto paper can be super powerful. So I recommend writing it with the intent to just throw it away, because you'll be more honest and you'll be able to more free flow, let your thoughts and your feelings come out. Another good one is exercising, going to the gym, being able to throw some weights, put some boxing gloves on, punch a bag, whatever that looks like, right? Those are some of the key things that I do, some healthy outlets that you can have. And the key thing here is you want to make sure that whatever you do, you want to make sure you're respecting the other person, right? Even if you don't want to in that moment. I think that's the most important thing if you are going to approach it when you're angry. And I know one of these coaches I've been working with that talks a lot about this stuff, I told him a couple scenarios, and he said the same thing pops up for you each time, Jimmy. When you get yourself in trouble, you're not in your heart. And I thought about that for a second. I was like, damn, that's good. He's like, you're not in your heart. You're in your head. Logically, it makes sense. You're in your body, whatever, but you're not in your heart. And so you forget about the other person. You forget to have empathy. You forget to love in that moment. And that's why it gets you in trouble. So you got to remember when these things come up, right? The goal isn't to win the conversation. That's where we also get in trouble. You want the other person to know that you're right? You want them to know that you had this correct. Well, even if you win, sometimes you lose. You ever heard this before? You can be right all the time, but nobody cares if you're an asshole. And so you want to find resolutions that help and work for everybody. Like not needing to win the situation will take a lot of the anger and a lot of the bad parts of how you're approaching this away from it. Let the other person win. Give the other person the win. And sometimes when we forget to love that person, it helps if you think about them as a little kid. Go back to like picturing them when there was this little girl or this little boy and, you know, they just want to be loved. Like most of the time when we're mad at somebody, what's really happening, especially if we're triggered this way, where we're just really angry in that moment, is something's come up for us and there's information there, but usually it's we're forgetting to see them as a person. And so when you can try to love them and just see them as a little kid, see them as an innocent kid, just, you know, not knowing how to have a better conversation and how not to act better in this moment. And that can really help. The second situation when you should remain silent is when you're tempted to gossip or speak bad about somebody else. Okay. This is, oh my gosh, this is a must. In my program, We Are the They, if anybody speaks ill about somebody else or gossips, it's like it's enough that you could be kicked out of the group. And the reason why is if the group's not safe, if that container's not safe, then nobody's going to open up and be able to really do some deep dives and get the healing that they're looking for. So gossiping, it's a zero tolerance game. And it's interesting because a lot of people, it's tempting to want to gossip or talk about other people because it feels like you're bonding with the person you're talking to when you do it. So you feel like you're bonding with them. And so it's really dangerous because it feels good in the moment. You actually feel superior, like you have, you know, yeah, we're better than them. We know something they don't know, or we know that they're not as good of a person as they say or whatever. So it feels like you're superior. But the truth is the biggest issue with gossiping and with talking ill of others is it erodes the trust in all of your relationships. How many of us have said something and it got back to the person that we never thought it would, and we're like, oh my gosh, like, and we just feel stupid? Or how many of us, I remember one time I was on a houseboat trip in Lake Powell, and it was before I would host these trips, and it actually was the impetus for a lot of who I would later on decide to bring on the boats and how I wanted those boats to be. But I remember some of these people were just talking poorly about one of the girls on the boat, and they didn't realize that she was standing in the kitchen. They couldn't see her behind the wall. And like 7-8 people were talking shit on her, and she just walked out and she was bawling and she kind of yelled a little bit. And then the entire rest of the trip, we're talking 2 days of this trip, were just kind of a mess. And it was really sad because there was no trust on that boat. I just wanted to go home. I didn't know the people well enough to still be there. I just remember it was just like, oh my gosh. But and here's the thing, guys, when you're talking bad about somebody else, it only looks bad on the person talking shit. Like we think that, oh, if I can say something about this other person, it's going to tear them down. One of my favorite things when I was, in the single scene, I guess you could say, like, you know, actively going to a lot of parties and events and things like that. All the time, women would come up to me and they'd be like, oh, you're Jimmy Rex. So-and-so was talking shit on you. Or they wouldn't even tell me. They're just like, oh, I've heard a lot about you. And I was like, well, hopefully it wasn't too bad. And they're like, and it was funny because later on, all these different women, they would always say, like, you know, once I got to know you, it was funny is like when the person was saying stuff bad about you, I had multiple girls I ended up dating that said this. They're like, so many people, like there were so many people just talking shit on you. I said, what is with this guy? Why do these guys always want to talk about him? And so they would ultimately want to meet me to just see what the hell the shit talking was all about. And they would get to know me, and then they'd realize, oh, it was those guys that were just insecure. It had nothing to do with me. And so it actually ended up helping me quite a bit. But really, when we talk bad about anybody else, it just looks bad on us because that person knows, we know when somebody's talking shit about someone to us, we know, oh, well, then I'm not going to share anything with them because when I'm not here, they're going to turn on me as well. So the opposite's also true though, right? You know, a lot of times I can't, you know, if you were to say, like, if somebody starts talking shit, if somebody's talking badly about other people in front of you and you say something like, you know, I can't really say anything on that because I don't know enough about the situation. It's a great line. You know what? I don't really know. One of my buddies, my buddy Mike Allen, he told me one time that he was at a party and some people were just saying some things about me that weren't very nice. And he just turned to him and he said, hey guys, you clearly don't know Jimmy the way I do because that's not the guy that I've known for 20 plus years. And he's an amazing human. You guys should get to know him better. And he said the room just immediately went silent. Nobody had anything else to say. But giving that line, right, just saying, you know what, I don't have enough information on that to speak about the situation. It's a really good way to kind of check people without it being like, okay, Mr. Too Good for Us. And so that's one of the lines that I encourage people to use when you hear other people doing that, or just the temptation is, and this happens so much, especially in like closed communities, but really like being the person that's big enough and just not always having to say something. So just like we talked about, it's a really good time to remain silent. So another question you can ask yourself in those situations is, would I say the same thing if that person was here in the room? Would I be talking the same way about them if they were standing next to me? And if the answer is no, pretty good sign that you should remain silent. So a couple questions you want to ask yourself in any situation is, number one is this kind? What's being said or what I'm saying? Is this necessary? And is it constructive or useful? Those are great questions because it really helps you clean up your own language around if you're gossiping and talking poorly about others. And so when other people are gossiping, right, and you don't want to say anything, it really shows who values integrity and loyalty and respect and some of these qualities that everybody's attracted to. So I really think it goes a long ways for you when you can hold your tongue in those situations and remain silent. The third one, third time to remain silent is when you're in the presence of somebody that's going through a hard time. When I was younger, I always wanted to have solutions, man. I always wanted to be the guy that knew what to say. And I remember I was talking to my buddy Ben one time, and he was super depressed. He was a very successful college athlete, and he just found out he had a season-ending injury, I think 2 years in a row. And I remember we were out there, we were talking, and I thought I had all the answers to his problems. And he just turned to me, as a good friend will, and he goes, "Hey, man, I don't really expect you to have the answers to these problems. I don't really want you to." And I just remember thinking like, oh, shit. And I obviously didn't learn my lesson because years later I was hanging out with a bunch of friends, and my friend Nick Hallen, Dr. Halland, we were hanging out one night, and I went into coach mode again, and he turns to me and he goes, "Hey, man, I just need a friend tonight. I don't really need you to coach me." And we just sat there for hours, right? And a lot of times the best thing we can give somebody else is our presence. We teach in my program, again, for men. I think where we get in trouble a lot of times is the woman starts to come to you with your issues, and we get caught up trying to fix those issues or trying to talk her through it. What they really want to do is women, they connect through complaining and through having their issues and everything else. But what they really want is for you to just be present with them. So the best thing that you can say to them a lot of times is just say, "Hey, do you want me to just listen, or do you want me to try to help you solve this?" And usually they'll tell you. And a lot of times they're like, "I just want you to listen." Okay, then just listen. And a lot of times they'll say, "No, I want you to help me work through it." Then you have permission to start working through that. But one of the most powerful energies you can give to another human is to just be present and listen. I remember when one of my buddies' mom passed away, I went over to his house, and we're both baseball guys, and he was sitting in his basement. And he was so heavy. I could tell he was so down about this. And I just sat there. And I sat there for 4 hours straight watching, I don't remember, some shitty baseball game. But neither of us said a word. And he told me later how much that meant to just be there. And and it was actually the friend that had told me years earlier that he didn't really want me to answer his problems. And I'd learned with him, and I just was able to be present there with him, right? No judgment or anything else. When human beings feel, what they really want is they want to be heard, they want to feel understood, and they want to feel supported. And you can do all those things without saying a single word. By the way, 85% of our communication, guys, is nonverbal. And so it's really important when when you're in the presence of somebody going through a hard time, that you're not on your phone, that you're not distracted, that even your mind just isn't somewhere else. And, I talked to David Dita. I hired him to coach me a couple years back. He's the author of The Way of the Superior Man. And he taught me one thing that just has been a superpower for me. And he taught me the power of being present with the person you're with. It's not being anywhere else, but it's not even in your head anymore. So you're so dialed in what they're doing and just being present with them. You literally try to match their breathing, you match their posture, and they'll feel so seen, or they'll feel so seen and feel so heard by you. He compared it to like when in a baseball game, right? If you're a baseball player, you ever played baseball? When the pitch is coming, if even 1% of 1% of you is not completely dialed in on that pitch coming, there's no chance you're going to hit it. And he said, that's what it feels like to be present. I was like, damn, that's a good analogy for that. So one of the best things you can do, again, is just to support others and help them find their own answers. This is something that in the past, my ego would get in the way. And I would try to answer people's problems, let them know that I'm smart, that I had all the answers, right? And I still do this way more than I should. It's something that I have to work on. And it's all about silence, right? Because a great leader helps you find your own answer. It's not giving you the answer. It's helping lead you to the answer. And then because what that does is it helps the person that comes up with the answer, they can trust the answer they got. It helps them be more resilient. It helps them be a better leader. Again, this was something that when I was younger, I had a huge problem with this, right? I always had to feel the silence in my life. How many of you guys have experienced this, right? I was always, I remember being on dates and I couldn't just sit there and let there be silence. And, the last vacation I went on with 3 of my high school best buddies. We've been on these trips, all over the world and things like that. We were in Africa and we had multiple rides. We went to Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda. We went and climbed with gorillas, and it was really cool. And we had at times like 7 or 8 hours a day of driving, if I'm being honest, like for like 3 or 4 days in a row. And there was 2 hours, 3 hours at a time where it would just be silence. Everybody could be in their thoughts. We're just being there. We're being present with each other. But we learn to sit in that discomfort, and then it's not uncomfortable anymore. I think that's how you can know you truly are comfortable with somebody, when you can sit there in silence with them and not need to say anything, not need to be moving, not need to be doing anything. So number 4, then the last one that I want to cover here, situation where you should remain silent, is if there's a heated argument or contentious debate. And a lot of times the person that's quote unquote right in an argument or right in a debate is still the loser, right? Because we forget the principle that and again, it goes back to what's your outcome? What are you trying to do here? What do you want to come out of this? How do you want this to end? Because a lot of times you can be right about something, but I had a buddy, he was like the smartest guy in the room always. And I said to him one time, I said, congratulations, dude, you're the smartest guy here, but nobody likes you. There's a tweet that got really famous and went viral that said, if you're so smart, how come you don't have any friends, right? Because a lot of times people that want to just sound smart, they want to win every debate. They want to win every argument. It's like I'm a big Trump guy when it comes to a lot of his policies and things like that. But if you leave everybody else feeling like they got destroyed, a lot of times the debate or the argument doesn't really work in your favor. It's where he gets in trouble. If he could just learn this, when the Democrats rope him into it all the time in the debates. They just did it in the Kamala Harris one, and they make him look mean. And so women don't vote for him. And a lot of people say he's just mean, and they rope him right into it, because even if you have the right information, even if you make the other person look stupid, if you come off rude or mean, then you lost really the battle that was going on, the one that people care about. And so when there's a heated debate, when there's an argument, this is a really good time to remain silent. When we get in that fight or flight, we say things. I've seen, situations where it happens so fast too. And we just need to be able to stop ourselves long enough to go, you know what? I don't have to feel like this. I don't have to act like this. And be the kind of friend that'll pull your friends aside when they get in those situations and help them get back into the right state of mind. Help them to be silent. I'll tell you a quick story. I was at my buddy's 40th birthday party a couple of years ago, and we had this amazing night, amazing party. And one of our friends that night, we had a tattoo artist came to the party. And I just thought it'd be fun to, hired this tattoo artist. I thought it'd be hilarious. And a lot of people were getting their first tattoos. Like I think 11 people got their first tattoo that night. And one of them, him and his wife were just in different places as far as they were with religion and church and all these different things. And she got super fresh. I could see it. It wasn't even like she wasn't saying anything, but I could tell how uncomfortable she was because her husband was going to get this tattoo. He's one of my best friends. And even the tattoo artist recognized, she said, hey, you need to go talk to your wife real quick to make sure she's good with this. And he was like, hey, I'm doing this. But, and they were gotten this really heated argument. And it was interesting because I could tell that she couldn't even help it. There was so much change happening in her life, and she was so uncomfortable with this. And so I pulled him aside. He was so mad. I pulled him into the pantry. I was just like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, I'm done. I'm done with this marriage. I'm done with fighting this stuff. I'm not doing this. And he was so mad. He was so heated. And I said, bro, stop. And I said, there's one thing that you need to know right now. I did the same thing to a girlfriend a couple of years ago. I was this mad and I broke it off. And I said, I needed one friend to pull me aside and just be like, dude, chill for a second. Like, and I told him, I said, there's nothing you can't say or do tonight you can't do in the morning. And he was so mad. He's like, I don't care. I'm going to feel the exact same way in the morning. He's fighting me. And I'm like, I'm not letting you out of the freaking pantry, bro, because you're about to ruin your marriage and you don't need to. He's got like 4 kids. And finally, and he's bawling. He's like, he was so frustrated. He was just, tears were coming out. He was so mad that he couldn't fix the situation. And finally, though, because he's a level-headed human, he's a brilliant man, he looks at me and he stops and he goes, all right, what do I do? And I gave him advice at the time that I didn't know was so good. It's what I'm talking about here today. I said, literally go to bed. Do not say one more word. Do not say one word to your wife. I knew the next words out of his mouth could be the last ones to her. I said, dude, just be silent. Go to bed. Wake up in the morning and we'll deal with it. I'll wake up early. We'll talk it through. But you tonight, go to bed. Do not sleep next to her. Do not, just go. And because we're all sleeping up at this cabin together. And he did. And, I'll fast forward the story. In the morning, he was actually still super heated. I saw him in the kitchen the next day and I'm like, do you feel a little better? He goes, no, I feel the exact same. But he wasn't like raging mad, right? And throughout the day, got a little bit calmer. We were up in the mountains and they ended up having this beautiful night. And it literally was like one of the best nights of their marriage they've ever had. The point is like sometimes we just need to shut the hell up. Sometimes we just need to give some time for the things, the emotions to clear, the hurt to clear, and understanding to take in. What he wasn't understanding, what I was able to explain to him finally, was that his wife literally couldn't help the way she was reacting because so much change was happening. Her nervous system was breaking down on her. And when I explained it that way, and then he was able to calm her with a couple of reassurances and they had the most beautiful night. And it was such a beautiful thing for me to witness. It was one of the first days I was like, I could actually maybe be a coach one day, because it was really beautiful. It was really beautiful to just, because I had needed that earlier times in my life, I was able to provide. I knew exactly what to provide for somebody else. It's one of the funnest things about being a coach. I'm not out here like, hey, do what I'm telling you to do. Like the reason why I'm qualified to do this is because I've screwed so many of these things up. I have a lot of life experience now, and I've unfortunately done a lot of things the wrong way. And so I've studied how to get it right. And this is one of the most powerful things you can do, you guys, is just learning when to be silent. And I'll end it with this. My coach, Stefanos Safandos, started working with him about a year and a half ago. He's a brilliant man. And he said, Jimmy, the mysteries of God are presented to us in silence, solace, and solitude. There's a very big difference between being alone and being lonely, right? Choose to be alone. Choose to go into silence. Choose to have solitude. Our mind is full of so many things, you guys. There's so many stimuluses we have now that we need to put our phones away a couple hours a day and just go sit in nature or go do something without them so that our mind can clear out. And there's a lot of studies been done on this. There's a lot of guys are starting to talk about this. But we have to be able to give this time for our mind to just clear, and then we can start getting answers to the questions that are coming to us. So I hope this was helpful. Listen, if you like these teachings, I teach every single Tuesday, 1 o'clock Utah time. We do our tribe call with We Are the They. And on these calls, we talk about subjects like this. It's interactive. We're talking to other guys. We're getting people's stories. We're holding each other accountable. We have a community of men that are trying to be better, that are working on issues like this. We're doing the embodiment work, and we have retreats. We have get-togethers all the time. We'd love to have you look into us. Check out wearethetheymovement.com. And in the meantime, we will see you on the next podcast. Thank you for listening.